Hello, this is my oral presentation on reinventing public media, a TEDx talk by Amadou Bakayoko, an Ivorian public personality and broadcasting CEO. First, TED is a nonprofit organization that is making great ideas accessible to everyone via TED biannual conferences they called the TED Talk. The TED Talk formula is as follows. Experts in their field or private person like myself can share their ideas or experiences at the conferences or different talks on a smaller level. The smaller level talks are called TEDx. They are the same formula as the TED Talk, but at a local level. And they live stream these conferences or talks on YouTube in real time. Reinventing public media and concerned the Ivorian broadcasting television called RTI or Radiodiffusion Télévision Ivoirienne. I chose this text because it highlights the opportunity to learn about some important translation strategies, some important subtitling strategies, and I could practice and develop a more evolved transfer competence in both the translation part as well as the subtitling part. The author has been called one of the best that Ivory Coast have had, especially with his success on revamping and innovating RTIs. And he's held many management positions in the media, in accounting industries at home and abroad. He studied in France, he's worked in the US, but he's mostly known for his work at the RTI. And what makes his approach so revolutionary, it's because he wanted to go international. He wanted the television channel to be more of an international company. So one thing important is to know the television channel is a public company, and he wants to use a private company attitude in order to make the channel profitable and durable as well, sustainable. The text itself is not technical, but the subtitling process is. And it was a little bit harder to do the subtitling than it was to do the translation. The translation itself is pretty straightforward, except the script was not very clear, the French script, so I had to literally transcribe a little bit before I could translate. Or at least correct the translation because the script did not use the correct word. So it was important while doing that to have access to online databases or other and from in other places where I could confirm some informations. For example, when the speaker referred to places or people that he's encountered experiences in the US with the French accent, sometimes it's hard to know what he's exactly talking about. Where he says Jim Draper or Bill Draper, and he says XM Bank. So these words were not very clear how they are, and the transcript itself did not have the correct one. So that represented a little bit of challenge for me. For the subtitling itself, I try to follow Syntax and Ramiel's guidelines in the main textbook we use in the class, that of having 37 characters per line on a total of 72 characters maximum. I rarely have 72, I believe. I think most of the time it's the 60s, early 60 characters, because of the pace that the speakers speak at. It become a little bit more, I guess, harder to confine a certain number of words or a certain number of characters within that limits. I wasn't, as I said, familiar with a lot of the references that he he talked about, especially the names, because I am not in part of the accounting industry. So I had to Google these and make sure that I was using the correct name, because there are many people with the name Jim. And XM Bank, I did not know what that was at all until I connected with the year, in the 60s, so in the 80s. So that's when I realized it's export and import bank in the US. So the strategies that I use are simple condensation and reformulation strategies, and with their comparable recasting with that I normally used with my translation work anyway. And I restructured sentences, and I know it's very important to figure out what changes are important and what changes are not, or what parts of the sentence that needs to be preserved and what parts that can be taken out. So relevant and irrelevant information or words or clues were definitely very important to know while I was trying to recast and reformulate some of these sentences. Especially French has a tendency to use very long-winded sentences. It's always hard to translate them sometimes, because they say way many more words than is needed. So that was a little bit challenging. For reference guides, I did use Google for the names for the bank, and then and so, like the company, for example, Cafe Cacao. It's an Ivory Coast company that I would say manages or supervise the coffee and cocoa, chocolate export from Ivory Coast. And the speaker's dad worked for that company, and when he referred to it, it wasn't very clear what he was talking about. So that was very interesting to look for online. But for the most part, the strategies themselves, the actual translation process, and the actual text itself was more informed by Vinay and Dabernay, and as I said earlier, syntax and Ramael's guidelines. For the YouTube for the subtitling, YouTube has many tutorials, and I used a couple of them to be able to see if there were anything that I could do to make the work faster for me, especially with the time codes. As I explained, the script was a voice to text or speech to text result, and there were many errors. Plus, when you copy and paste or when you download, and sometimes the accents, which are like accent aigu, accent grave, don't get transferred. So it took a lot of time to try to refix these. And so that was really a big problem, trying to know what exactly the script says before I could translate it. And then sometimes in the way that the script was populated, sometimes there are just one line like je suis, and then I don't know, 15 words in the next one, and then another like just je, and then another 20 or 30 words in the next line. So I had to reconfigure the time code, because the time code of the original was not a really I wasn't able to work on it. Plus, it really does not fit the guidelines that I'm trying to follow for the project. So most of the things that I learned are around how to really pay attention, my word choice, and the time codes. How when you make a change in one time code, sometimes it's a domino effect for the rest, and that can definitely take up time. And definitely, I need to learn and practice so I know to not make my life so much more complicated than it needs to be when I do subtitling. I definitely have a lot of work to do, a long way to go, but I'm glad I picked the subtitle, because otherwise I probably would not have had the practice really to do it. And so it was definitely a good experience, but definitely time consuming, and I still have a lot to learn. Thank you. Has been my oral presentation on reinventing the codes, and hopefully you enjoy reading my essay. You have a nice summer. It was great to be in the class. Goodbye.